The Comfortably Zoned Radio Network proudly presents Charlie Vascellaro's Baseball Emporium. Here's Charlie.
And hello, it's Charlie Vascellaro here on the Baseball Emporium show, Charlie Vascellaro's Baseball Emporium on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. And I'm speaking with my friend once again, Ralph Tyko. Ralph's out in California and I'm in Arizona. Ralph, what are we, 1 hour difference in time right now? I got 9 o'clock where I am. What is it by you?
1 hour difference? Geez, I'm still working on last Thursday.
Well.
So I'm catching up time-wise. But thank you for having me on your fine program, young man.
And thanks for creating this network for us to have the program on. It's a lot of fun being here, and I enjoy seeing all the different guys who have shows on the network.
Well, we're doing the best, and you certainly add to the quality of it. We're, on behalf of everybody here, we're kind of a team, and it's coming together. We've got John DeQuisto, Peter Golenbach, Ron Rabinowitz with shows, Hal Bach.
You know, I haven't got a hold of DeQuisto's book yet, but I've been hearing rave reviews for John DeQuisto's book. Everybody's telling me how great it is, and I've got to go grab a copy.
Well, please do. John's been my friend for a number of years, not just a Facebook friend, but a friend. And he is incredibly talented. It's his first effort, and he's got 2 in the hopper already. And he's incredibly prolific and just a delight as a human being. Really is. So, and a number of shows. I mean, John talks with the co-author of his book on a weekly basis. He does his podcast with David Jordan, who likes to be known as Dave, as a matter of fact. And they just have hit it off as a number of the folks that I've gotten together to do podcasts. Peter Golenbach and Alan Blumpkin do an incredibly fine job. I don't know where to start. Like I said, David Nemec, old-time baseball and trivia expert. He's got a show, Hal Block, and I, as well as Alan Blumpkin, have a show that expands our horizons. We're not just baseball. We have a football, hockey, and basketball memory show where we go back to vintage times in the 50s and 60s and talk about the games and how they've changed going into our times that we live in. And we have a Dodgers show and a Giants show and a New York baseball show. And Ian Kahanowitz and Mark Weiss do a show called Genesis on the network that where they talk to people, and not just baseball people, but people in the world. So I'm proud of what we've got going, and as I say, you and I are into our 4th or 5th week, and it's incredibly interesting talking to you, Charlie. You're the spring training maven, and with that in mind, tell us about an award that you're accepting today, as later in the day.
Yeah, you know, this year's a special year out here in Arizona, and I think you and I may have already touched upon this. It is the Cactus League's 70th anniversary. Spring training baseball came to Arizona in 1947 because of Bill Veeck and Horace Stoneham. They were the owners of the Indians and Giants, and they brought their teams here for a multitude of reasons. One of them being they were both making early forays into integrated baseball in the year of Jackie Robinson, 1947, which also was the first year here. Bill Veeck signed Larry Doby a few weeks after Robinson made his debut with the Dodgers. And then Doby was out here in Tucson for spring training in 1948. And shortly thereafter, followed by Monty Irvin with the New York Giants, Willie Mays with the New York Giants, and Ernie Banks with the Chicago Cubs. All these guys came to Arizona for their first Major League springs. All four of these guys also played in the Negro Leagues before they played in the Major Leagues. And with that in mind this year, we inducted here in Arizona those four players into the League's Hall of Fame. All right, that's a newly formed entity. It's very exciting. You know, we started this a few years ago in Arizona, and I say we because I helped out as a volunteer with the organization. It's a Mesa Historical Museum, and they started gathering artifacts a few years ago and making museum installations that tell the story of spring training baseball in Arizona. And with that in mind, they also created an entity called the Cactus League Hall of Fame. And in the first 3 years of that Hall of Fame, they mostly inducted the league's founding fathers and people who were responsible for helping bring spring training baseball to Arizona and keep it here. Politicians, business people. Those were the first batch of inductees, but now we finally got around to inducting players. Those are the four that went in this year. And tonight, the mayor of Scottsdale is proclaiming it Cactus League Hall of Fame Week in Scottsdale. So I'm going to go down and meet him at City Hall this afternoon, and we're going to celebrate that together.
Wow. Big time, Charlie. And you've had two articles. This has been a great week for you. You've had two articles published, one in the local Arizona paper and one on MLB.com. Tell me about those articles and what precipitated them.
Yeah, you know, all of this has been a running theme this year, this idea of celebrating the integration of spring training baseball. And I think with all of what's going on in the world and a lot of the divisiveness that we have in current times, I think it's nice to reflect back on times when we came together over issues. And, you know, I think you'll be hard-pressed to find someone who wants to argue against the integration of Major League Baseball, which I think provides a nice common ground for us to reflect on things and how we improved our society as time went along. Baseball helped. Baseball was integral in the integration process here in Arizona, because when these guys showed up, this was a segregated territory. Every place you stepped foot, you know, Willie Mays was at our Hall of Fame ceremony and acceptance speech, and he mentioned the divide, the north and south divide of Phoenix. When he came out here for spring training and he couldn't stay with the team at the hotel, he was instructed there was a border, and he was instructed he's supposed to stay on the south side. When he did venture into the north side, sometimes he would get pulled over by police officers and they would ask him, "What are you doing on the north side?" Even guys who sometimes they didn't know who Willie Mays was. He was still early in his career. And he shared these memories with us, which was kind of amazing last week at the luncheon. And, you know, it reminds us how far we came and how baseball forced the integration of these institutions. If it was not for the black ball players that were here in town with the Giants and the Cubs and the Indians, hotels, bars, and restaurants had, because of their presence, were forced into integration. Whether or not they wanted to, they were forced into it because this was the new times, and the new times had arrived, and it was time for this to take place.
Welcome to humanity type thing.
Yes, yes.
You know, a wake-up call. Sorry, you're going to have to be humans. You know,
I had a great conversation. Oh, yeah, I had a great conversation with Bill White about this. Bill White, you know Bill White, former San Francisco Giant, New York President of the National League, a scholarly baseball man, an intelligent baseball man. He recently published a book a couple of years ago about his racial experiences, and it was called Uppity. and it's the story of what happened, behind the scenes. And I called Bill White because I saw him in a picture. I was doing some research, and I found this old photograph of Willie Mays and Bill White. And I said, look at that, there they are, and they're in the house that Willie Mays had rented in Phoenix. Instead of staying at the hotel, Mays found this little place next to the Elks Lodge. This is all in those two stories that I wrote. One was from the Republic and one's in the MLB.com, but it explains this. And I got this picture from the people at the Mesa Historical Museum. I said, look at that. That's Bill White, very recognizable face. And so I talked to him. I said, what was going on during those times that you can share with me? And, he experienced it, and he said it was happening all over. It wasn't just here or there. He said it happened in the northern towns as well. He tried to go to the movies with an actor friend of his, Jeff Chandler, who was friends with Leo DeRocher, was in some old Western movie. Well, I say old now, it was new then. And he says, let's go to the movies and watch my movie. And they walk up to the ticket window together, and they won't sell Bill White a ticket. He's with his friend, the actor in the movie. And this was, his first impression of Phoenix. That's what he remembered, unfortunately. Kind of a sad story to relate. And then I said, well, I was trying to go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say, it wasn't just Phoenix. It was all the racial indignities. I don't know if you could tell me what was worse for these players, Florida or Arizona.
Florida was worse, and to a man they say it. And that's why Bill Veeck mentioned in his book, Veeck is in Rec, that he was at a game when he owned the Milwaukee Brewers. He was in Ocala, Florida. Veeck preferred to sit with fans at games. Veeck was not one of these muckety-mucks. It had to be in some kind of private suite. He liked drinking beer and taking his shirt off and sitting out in the sun with the fans, just like anybody else.
Right.
Well, he was doing that in Florida in 1945. He owned the Milwaukee Brewers, which was a PCL team at the time, or a minor league team. I'm not sure if it was PCL, but it may have been. But he was sitting in the left field bleachers, which was a designated Negro section. And a cop comes over to him, the sheriff of the town, and tells him he's not allowed to sit there. Here he is, the owner of the team. And he tells him he's not allowed to sit there. And Bill Veeck was wondering why. He says, this is just for Negroes only. And he said that that was kind of a light bulb moment for him. He called the mayor over, and the mayor came over. He said, get somebody else in charge. I'm not going to listen to you. So the mayor comes over and says basically the same thing to him. And then Veeck tells the mayor, I got this team out here on the field. Maybe would you prefer we all went somewhere else? And with that, they didn't bug him anymore about sitting in the bleachers because he threatened to pull the team out. This is a running theme in this integration process. What happens is when you hit him in the wallet is when you make your advances, and which is also what Bill White reiterated when I was speaking to him. He said, these guys, when the hotels let us stay and the restaurants let us come in and the bars let us come in, it wasn't because they were also altruistic. They just didn't want to miss out on the money.
Right.
So.
These teams would threaten to go to a different hotel. And imagine what big money. You get 50 people, upwards of 50 people registered for 6-8 weeks at a time. That's their yearly profit margin right there. And
oh yeah.
You talk about the restaurant, in the hotel, all that, and to take the team out would just destroy. Yeah.
Even these days, it's a very competitive industry these days. You got 15 teams that stay down here, and the hotels are bucking for their business, and they want to make some kind of special. Official, they offer spring training specials to fans that include ball game tickets or transportation to the game, and they try and identify themselves with spring training. I mean, this is now a $450 million industry here in Arizona. That's what they estimate the economic impact of spring training baseball on the state. Isn't that amazing?
Well, I read something that tickets to sit out in the grass are $45 for a spring.
Yeah, that was probably for the Cubs. I know that some teams are seeing more demand than others, and of course the Cubs right now, which I think I sent you a photograph of the Sunday's game from Sloan Park. The Cubs are, of course, all the rage, and I mean, deservedly so. Every year, 30 teams go back to spring training, and 29 of them are hopeful that something great's going to happen this next year, and one of them gets to beat its chest and tell everybody that they won the World Series. That's the Cubs, and it's a great feeling.
Charlie, are these you did send me these photos, and were they taken by you?
On my phone. Can you believe it?
Wow, you're talented. You frame. I do a little photography, and you frame a picture. I talk well too.
Well,
very, very.
That
well.
one. Thanks. That one shot taken from the left field corner. Now, Sloan Park is a kind of a miniature Wrigley Field in certain ways. They were after that aesthetic. They brought the same light stanchions over, and they have these old-fashioned looking scoreboards. One of them, where I was standing behind, is on the second level. These ballparks are relatively small, so you got a major seating bowl downstairs, and then the second level has little party decks and things like that. And it's got a little stairway and another return going up to get to that second deck, and then into the scoreboard there, which is actually for the benefit of people who are sitting beyond the outfield wall. They have a grass hill, like you just mentioned, and they also have a deck, which they created with the Wrigley Field buildings, the Waveland Avenue and Sheffield Avenue buildings in mind. So they have a section that is reminiscent of sitting out there. It's a little far away, it's up high, and everybody's guzzling beer, but that scoreboard on that left field line is for them to see. It faces that way. And so I always love taking a shot from there because it captures all these great angles and symmetry. You got the scoreboard coming at you from the right side, but you can see out to right field. You can't quite see home plate from where I take that picture, but you get the feel of all that Wrigley stuff, like the light stanchions that are back there. And, of course, the Cubs are down on the field throwing balls to each other. But I just love the symmetry. I love the geometry of that particular point in the ballpark. That's my favorite place in that ballpark to just stand and take it in.
Nice. Charlie, no one loves baseball more than you. And to go back, I've had you on my airwaves so many times. What was your first baseball experience? The first time you hit a ballpark as a kid, and who took you, and what was that about?
Yeah, my first ball game was 1972, and I was at Shea Stadium. I lived in Long Island at the time, and my uncle took me. My Uncle Tony, my mom's younger brother, who was my godfather, still my godfather, and we sat up in left field pretty high. I guess it was either the second or third deck, and we saw the Montreal Expos, the Mets and the Expos, 1972. And I attempted to keep a scorecard. I was 8 years old, but I saw other people engaging in this activity. And I asked my uncle what they were doing. He said they're trying to keep track of what's going on. And I had it on my lap there and tried to figure it out just like him. And, of course, I had that moment that we all have when you come out of the tunnel. You come out of the darkness. If you remember Shea Stadium, they had all those switchbacks, those concrete walkway that you had to walk up, until you finally got there. And then you get to your section. It's a long walk. Then you get to your section and you come through that tunnel. And, it starts off being dark, but when you get to the end, it's all green and bright. It was a day game, but of course there was a lot more day games back in the old days. And, and so, that moment when you see the field is always, that's the moment. And then if you're a baseball fan or not, I think at that moment, if it makes your heart stop and you can't breathe for a second, that something is happening and you want to have that feeling again. And it's a feeling that gets recreated almost every time you go to a game, that moment where you go to where the seats are, where you come from the outside world into the grand theater of it all, and, so I say it's like that tunnel. It's like the birth canal. It's like being born again every time you come through that tunnel. And the world is in front of you.
And I'm gonna, when I post this podcast, I'm gonna put up the picture we talked about, and another picture that really illustrates it. You know, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. The look on this little boy's face at spring training, holding a bat,
Yeah.
the look of love for the game is what it's about and what you pass on to kids in that book on scoring. Interesting that your first experience at a game, you were curious about keeping score. And you wrote your book about keeping score and how to learn the game. You're terrific to talk to. Any players this week impress you that
I'll give you one, but I'll give you one, but I want to talk about that kid I sent you the picture of first, and then we'll jump to the player. So
okay.
I just forwarded you that picture of the kid, and he's holding the half of a broken bat you can see in his hand.
He's so happy that he's got this delightful face. My kid's all grown up. That's how my kid looked when he was like 7 or whatever age he's at. And I'm tearing up.
And look at his little brother next to him. So these guys, you can see they got great seats. I have been season ticket holder partners with some other guys on 2 of the best seats you'll ever sit in for a baseball game at Scottsdale Stadium where the Giants play. Since 1995, I've had 2 seats in the second row on top of the Giants dugout. So you never know who's going to be sitting with you over there. I sat next to Barry Bonds' wife and kids. I sat next to Wayne Gretzky. I sat next to Steve Nash. I sat next to Larry Baer. I sat next to all these people down there. Well, these kids are in front of me.
Charlie, all these people sat next to you.
We sat next to each other. You're correct.
Right. I mean, when you're at the ball game, all social stuff or class, race creed.
It's great. It's great. I sat next to Steve Nash. When I sat next to Nash,
That's a baseball fan.
Yeah, I was drinking beer and he's drinking beer, and I mentioned to him that I always thought he was a great basketball player, and he said thanks, but then we just put our eyes back on the game, But this little kid here, this bat had broke, and it was Connor Gillespie, which is a name that should live in infamy for Mets fans because he's the guy who hit the home run that knocked us out of the wild card game last year. But so Gillespie's up, and he hits the ball, and they got a new screen in front of the dugout, which is to protect the fans, of course, from foul balls. These seats are very close. So they've extended the screen a little bit, and they've raised the height of it as well. But this bat broke, and it's swirling like a helicopter, like a twirly bird going above us, and I was wondering if it was going to clear the screen. And it did. And it ended up a few rows behind us, and this kid pounced on it. He got up out of his seat. He knew where it was going. He was following the trajectory, and he went right up there. And he wasn't the first guy to get to it, but a gentleman, an older guy who was, picked it up and handed it right to the kid, which was a nice thing. Yeah. So the kid was, and it's funny, I saw another guy who was racing up there to get the bat, and I know he wasn't going to hand it to the kid. So I'm glad the guy who did, because the other guy was looking for it for himself. He was a grown kid, but he wanted it for himself, and he was in his 50s, But the kid got the bat, and he comes back to his seat, and I said, show me the label. I want to get a shot of that. So he turned the name so I could see it. And you see the joy on his little brother's face, too. The guy with the bat is 7, and the other guy is 5. They were the sons of an employee for the team. I figured it out because they were in those great seats 2 days in a row. And I said, I wonder who these kids are. And the guy, their father works for the Giants, which I later came to realize. But we had a nice couple of days talking about baseball together. And these kids, because they're growing up in the business, they were a little advanced. They were kind of smart for a 5 and a 7, especially the 7-year-old. Buster Posey came up one time in the 4th inning and hit a ground ball into a double play, and the little kid turns around to me and says, that's the second double play he hit into today. I said, I was like, this guy's paying attention.
It's in the game.
Yeah.
Nice. I am a Met fan, but I'm a Giants lover from when they were in New York and kind of an apologist living out here in the Bay Area. Connor Gillespie hits that home run that kills the Mets.
Yeah.
But I remain an admirer of Connor Gillespie. He came up years ago, 5-6 years ago, as a really touted prospect, highly touted prospect. He was either a number 1 or a number 2, and he kind of fizzled out. And he has adjusted to the role of kind of not a utility guy, a journeyman kind of ball player, and hung in there and spent a lot of time in the minors and came back with the Giants and in a totally different role. He was expected to be the next coming at one time, and now he's just kind of filled in. Nunez was hurt, if I'm not mistaken, and they had traded Duffy and all kinds of stuff going on last year. And the irony of it, of him hitting the home run, and all year I'd been admiring him for not quitting the game and all that. That's how baseball is. You know?
Yeah.
It's very strange. He broke my heart last year because, I'm a Met fan. I'm a Met guy. An original Met fan, I might say. And I might not. You never know, Charlie. What I say.
Well, in my fandom, I have a place for the Giants too, because I grew up a Mets fan on Long Island, and in the city too, in Queens, and I spent a lot of time with the Mets, and I'm very attached to them, and I still am. I live in Baltimore, but my Mets fandom is in my blood. But when my family moved to Arizona as a teenager, and I got here, I also gravitated to some of the teams that held spring training here, and in particular the Giants, because their ballpark was very close to my high school, which meant I could just play hooky and go over to the ballpark. And they had a minor league affiliate here in Phoenix dating back to the 50s. So they had a strong presence. You could see the players come up through the system with the Giants, and it was great fun to watch these guys advance to the majors right in our hot little town. We'd go sweat it out at these ballparks in Phoenix, and even at night it's 100 degrees. But we sat through a lot of that over the years before we got a major league team here, and so that created an association with me and the Giants as well. They were always one of my favorite teams. And of course, that the Mets genesis is in the Giants. It's in the Giants and the Dodgers, but I'd say their connection to the Giants is even stronger than the Dodgers, because Joan Payson, who was the initial owner of the Mets, was also a shareholder for the Giants. And when Stoneham was moving the Giants from New York to San Francisco, she was the most vehemently opposed of the minority shareholders to this. She didn't want to leave New York, and she didn't.
Voted no. She was the only one.
Yeah.
Board member.
So which means that when she took ownership of the Mets, that's what she was retaining with her. She was retaining this identity to the Giants. And we know that the Mets blue and orange, the blue comes from the Dodgers and the orange comes from the Giants. But I always felt that even though, and they had Gil Hodges, a former Dodger who was one of the managers, which is a strong tie, and also played for the team. But they also had Roger Craig pitching. They plucked players from both of those teams to field the Dodgers. More so from the Dodgers. But here's a guy like Willie Mays, which we talked about, who finished his career with the Mets, and I thought that was apropos. Here he came up in New York with the Giants, he goes to San Francisco with the Giants, but when it was time to say goodbye, they brought him back to New York, and that was also a strong connection in my mind between the two franchises, is Willie Mays.
True enough, Charlie, but I was an original Met fan and a former New York Giant fan, and I didn't like it. They had Zimmer, they had Hodges, they had Neal, they had Pignatano, they had a bunch. Snyder played for him in the second year, bunch of Dodgers, and they tried to keep that Dodger flavor. So it's the era, how you look at it. Hey, Wilpon in the new stadium has a Jackie Robinson rotunda.
I would say Wilpon is way different than Payson in that way. where, yes, he very much embraced the Dodgers history. He's a Brooklyn guy. And you know what? I love the Jackie Robinson Rotunda. I could almost have seen them naming the ballpark after Jackie Robinson, which I think a lot of people wanted them to do. But when the bank has the last say, the bank has the last say.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, baseball honored Jackie by retiring his number in every ballpark in the country. I think that's beautiful, long overdue.
And he's the only one. That's it.
He's the only one. Now, you could go back and say, should Babe Ruth's number be retired along the same line? Should.
Yeah, it's funny. I do think about that one, and, I think about Aaron as well. But the thing I like about Aaron's number is I like that when players decide to pick up that mantle, when they like to, you think of the other great 44s, Willie McCovey and Reggie Jackson and guys like that who wore the 44 and obviously did so as an homage to Hank. And even one of the umpires, Kerwin Danley, one of the few black umpires in baseball who I have this crazy cosmic connection to. I see an inordinate amount of games where Kerwin Danley is the umpire. And I always wonder why that's the case, because, there's all these different umpiring crews, and you could end up with any umpires on any given day.
Well,
but
you keep the grave of Emmett Ashford going.
Yeah.
So, do you think there's some cosmic energy?
Yeah, there's something going on. Every time I go to a ballpark, especially if it's the first game of the spring, I'm out at Scottsdale Stadium, I look out and say, hey, of course Kerwin Danley's at second base. He always is. And he wears the number 44, and I've never asked him, but I have a feeling it has something to do with Hank. So. So I don't want Aaron's number to necessarily be retired because I like seeing who wears it. And it's funny, the Babe, too, although you seldom see guys wear number 3 anymore, and they usually end up being middle infielders or platoon guys. It's funny that number isn't associated with big sluggers. Maybe guys are afraid to even put it on. But my other favorite number...
They're intimidated by the hitting memories of Bud Harrelson.
Exactly. So that's kind of funny. But my favorite number 3 outside of the Babe is Kelly Leak. You know Kelly Leak, the slugger from the Bad News Bears, the motorcycle riding, cigarette smoking 12-year-old who joins the Bears and is their salvation. And there's that great segue scene where they convince him to be on the team, and he's at one time hitting a ball in practice. But then it's one of the best segues I ever saw in a baseball movie. When the ball's up in the air in practice, when they bring the camera back down to him running the bases, now he's in a game. So what they're showing is the immediate impact that Kelly Leak had on the Bears, and it's really done to tremendous effect. I want to use this opportunity to segue into something else. The intentional walk rule. The intentional walk rule. So you know what's going on.
Fussing over that, I think that greases the way for more changes, and it takes away from the game. I think the intentional walk gives people a chance to sit in the stands and talk about the fact that they could throw the ball away and a run could score.
All of that has to be taken in consideration when you're going to make an intentional walk. It's a demand that is placed on a pitcher because it affects his psyche, too. It affects the psyches of everyone involved. It affects the psyche of the player who's being intentionally walked. It affects the psyche of the guy who's coming up next.
How about right?
And those are pitches added on a pitcher's pitch count. You're asking him to now go away from the strike zone, where all night long he's trying to stay in the strike zone. Oftentimes, after an intentional walk, a pitcher can't find the strike zone. I mean, how many you've seen that happen, where a guy is walked intentionally, and then the next guy's walked unintentionally because the guy has lost his control. And you're going to lose moments,
And whose decision was it to walk the guy intentionally? Was it the manager's decision, or was it the pitcher's decision? Pitcher could have things go, I didn't want to walk the guy. I didn't like the guy coming up next. That kind of thing. Whereas,
all of that is the nuances of it and the strategy involved with making that decision has all been removed, and I don't like that. And you know what? They talk about it saving time. There's one intentional walk every 2 games, and I'll tell you, 4 pitches thrown intentionally outside probably gets accomplished a lot quicker than the normal at bat. So I don't know exactly what they're saving here. And you would lose a moment, and I was talking about Kelly Leak. One of my favorite moments in intentional walk history, if you remember the last game, the Bears are playing the Yankees. They're down by 3 runs. There's 2 runners on base. Kelly Leak, the team's best hitter, is coming to the plate, and Vic Morrow, the nasty manager of the Yankees, gives the signal to his pitcher, 4. He holds up the 4 fingers, throw 4 pitches to walk him. So here, now, then Matthau yells from the Bears dugout, "What are you doing? You're walking the tying run on base?" And Morrow says to him, "My first baseman's lonely." So they have this great exchange over the intentional walk. And Leak is frustrated. He's looking at these pitches being thrown outside, and then he looks back over his shoulder at Walter Matthau after, I think, the second, maybe even the 3rd intentional pitch. And Matthau says to him with his hands, "Reach out there and go and swing for one of those." So Kelly Leak reaches up high and outside and blasts a ball into the right center field gap. The 2 runners come around to score, and here he is with the tying run going for an inside-the-park home run on what should have been an intentional walk. Of course, we know what happens. He's thrown out at the plate, and the Bears lose by a run. And if that isn't one of the greatest moments in intentional walk history, now could you imagine if this rule was instituted before that film was made, we never even would have had that scene.
That's right. That's exactly right. What I just flashed on Ralph Terry not wanting to face McCovey, or not wanting to face Cepeda, and pitching to McCovey, having the option to walk him intentionally at that time. So decisions are made, and you would think he would have given McCovey was a left-hander. You would think he'd want to pitch to left-handed batter. I think he'd want to pitch to Cepeda. Pitches to McCovey. McCovey hits one on the screws right to Bobby Richardson. So, but that one, the 4 pitches wouldn't have affected it. But when I thought of intentional walks, that's what came to mind. That's my baseball memory for intentional walks. Charlie, what else do you have going for the rest of the day? You're going to be presented with an award tonight on behalf of all those that made it possible. Where are you going?
Tomorrow is the first day of the 9 conference. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with what the 9 conference is. But the 9 group, NINE, all spelled with capitals, it's an annual baseball symposium that takes place. It's mostly college professors and educators and different academics, and people write their presentations. They make their research presentations and present them to the group. And we get things underway tomorrow with regards to the 9 conference. And I'm speaking at the opening at the reception. There's a cocktail party. It's great fun. Last year, I interviewed a bunch of beer vendors. That was my presentation, was on beer vendors last year. And I brought some of these traveling beer vendors to the 9 conference, and we had a little talk show in front of the crowd, which was great. This year, it's a little different. I'm making a presentation relative to W.P. Kinsella's book, The Iowa Baseball Confederacy. Are you familiar with that book?
I am indeed. It's not his most famous book.
I like it better than his most famous book. His most famous one, Shoeless Joe, of course.
Right.
But the Baseball Confederacy, this book is what they call magic realism, which is Shoeless Joe, where people step in and out of time and they're able to time travel and speak with spirits and stuff like that. So that takes place in this book as well. But the premise of the book, the storyline, is that the 1908 Cubs, the last Cubs team to win a series before the 2016 Cubs, played an exhibition game against a minor league team, and it wasn't even really a minor league team. It was more like a local 9 in Iowa. It was like I guess it was a minor league all-star team. So
that's what they called the local club teams in those days, the 9.
Yeah. So the Cubs are coming to play this team, but for some reason, the story has been lost. Nobody seems to remember this happening except our hero, Gideon, the guy who is the protagonist of the book. This story was told to him by his father. Everybody thinks they're both crazy because they're so convinced that this took place, but nobody else remembers it ever taking place. Well, sure enough, Gideon finds a crack in time and makes his way back into 1908. And this game is going on. He ends up sitting on the bench with one of the teams. He ends up becoming a mascot for the Cubs team. And then his friend is also playing as a starter, a friend who comes with him in time for the other team. And so while they're there for this game, there's some supernatural interference going on. There's a Native American chief, an old Indian in the sky, who's kind of pulling the puppet strings on this game. He's having an effect on how it goes. Well, it goes on for 2,000 innings, most of it in a torrential downpour. It starts raining after the 85th inning, and it never stops raining. And they just keep getting up the next day and playing in the rain. Well, when the Cubs and Indians went to Game 7, and Rajai Davis hit that home run for the Indians to tie the game after 8 innings, and then it rained, I thought to myself, this is just like the Iowa Baseball Confederacy. So I started making analogies and comparisons, and I've written a paper comparing the 2016 World Series to the Iowa Baseball Confederacy, and that's what I'll be talking about tomorrow night.
Beautiful. Charlie, great show, as usual. How do you want to close it out? Anything you want to say in particular that first week of spring training?
Yeah, I got to 4 games so far this week, and I saw the Giants and the Cubs, and I saw the Giants and the Reds, and I saw the Reds and the Diamondbacks, and then I saw the great World Series rematch on Sunday between the Cubs and the Indians. And wouldn't you know, it ended in a tie. Just like what we're talking about here. These two teams can't get out of each other's hair. And I this sense of that, even though it's a meaningless exhibition game, and most of the starters weren't even playing, but the symbolism, and this endless tie that they seem to begin. Some people were calling it Game 8 on Sunday when they showed up to play against each other. And I think we already talked about this. After the series was over, members of both the Cubs and Indians played on the same Arizona Fall League team that also won the championship. So they seem to be linked and destined to be together. And I sometimes think that, the teams that made it to the World Series, when the two best teams like last year, you wonder if there'll be a rematch. And they don't happen all that often, these World Series rematches. But I think this is just as good a year of any to predict that it might. So I will leave on that note.
Beautiful. We will catch you next week then, Charlie.
Yes, Ralph, it's been a pleasure chatting with you again.
It always is. And it's getting to be one of the highlights of my week. I try to have one every day. And
yeah.
This is nice, Charlie. So to all of you out there, from my behalf, I just want to say keep on keeping on. And I want to thank you, Charlie, because you're reaching out to fans in a new way. Podcast radio is terrific, and you add to it. And that's all I want to tell you, Charlie. Have a great week.
Thank you very much, Ralph. I'll look forward to talking with you next week and seeing what happens in between now and then.
Absolutely. Be well, my friend.